My wife said I was too boring and moved in with her exciting ex, telling me, "He actually knows how to live dangerously. You're just a pathetic, predictable nobody who will never be anything special." I smiled and said, "You're absolutely right. I am quite boring." Then I disappeared without a trace, leaving only an empty house and closed bank accounts. 6 months later, her exciting life became police raids and restraining orders after her ex's drug dealing caught up with them. Now she's desperately camping outside my parents' house because I won't answer her calls. And her friends keep messaging me, "She's completely broken, please come back from wherever you are." She screams your name in her sleep and says she'd give anything to have her boring life back. I was sitting at our kitchen table, reading the morning paper like I did every single day for 8 years of marriage, when she walked in with that look. You know the one I'm talking about, right? That look that says your whole world is about to get flipped upside down before you've even finished your coffee. "Ryan, we need to talk." She didn't sit down. That was my first clue. I folded my paper neatly, because that's what boring people do, apparently, and looked up at her. "What's on your mind?" "I'm leaving you." Just like that. No build-up, no gentle letdown, no "it's not you, it's me." Straight to the point. I had to admire her efficiency, even if it was crushing my heart into a million pieces. "For Jake," she continued, mentioning her ex-boyfriend from college. "He's back in town, and seeing him again made me realize what I've been missing. He actually knows how to live dangerously. You're just a pathetic, predictable nobody who will never be anything special." Now, here's where most people would expect me to get angry, right? Start yelling, throwing things, making a scene? But I just sat there, stirring my coffee with that same methodical motion I'd used for years. "You're absolutely right," I said, meeting her eyes with the calmest expression I could muster. "I am quite boring." The confusion that flashed across her face was almost worth the pain. She'd clearly prepared for a fight, for tears, for begging. But boring old Ryan just agreed with her. "I'll be moved out by tonight," she said, recovering her composure. "Jake's picking me up at 7. "Sounds good. I'll help you pack if you'd like." And I did. I helped my wife of 8 years pack her bags to move in with another man. I folded her clothes with the same care I always had, wrapped her picture frames in newspaper, and even carried her suitcases to the car when Jake pulled up in his flashy red sports car. Jake didn't even get out to help. Just sat there revving his engine like some teenager trying to impress the popular girl. Mia gave me one last look, maybe hoping for some final dramatic gesture, but I just waved goodbye from our front porch. After they drove away, I went back inside and finished reading my paper. But here's the thing about boring people that exciting people never seem to understand: we're really, really good at planning ahead. You see, I wasn't always boring. That's just who I became after I met Mia. Before her, I had a completely different life, one that would have given her all the excitement she could handle and then some. But I'd buried that person deep, locked him away because I thought domestic bliss was worth more than the adrenaline rush. I spent 3 days after she left just sitting in our empty house, thinking. On the 4th day, I made some phone calls. On the 5th day, I visited 3 different banks. On the 6th day, I cleaned out our joint accounts, every penny I'd contributed over the years, which was most of it since I'd always been the responsible one managing our finances. On the 7th day, I disappeared. Not dramatically, mind you. I didn't leave burning rubber or a cryptic note. I simply locked up the house, forwarded my mail to a P.O. box 3 states away, and drove off into the sunset like the most boring man alive. But I wasn't driving to some quiet retirement community or peaceful cabin in the woods. No, I was driving back to the life I'd left behind, the one where Ryan Cross wasn't a predictable nobody, but someone very different entirely. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to completely reinvent yourself? To shed one identity like an old coat and slip into another one that fits like it was custom-made? 3 weeks after I disappeared, I was sitting in a penthouse apartment overlooking the city, using skills I hadn't touched in a decade. Skills that would have made Mia's head spin if she'd known about them. Skills that made Jake's little rebellions look like a child playing dress-up. Meanwhile, back home, things were getting interesting for my dear ex-wife. I kept tabs on the situation through mutual friends. Boring Ryan had been very good at maintaining those relationships. Apparently, Jake's idea of living dangerously included some rather questionable business ventures. The kind that attract attention from people you really don't want noticing you. Mia had moved into Jake's apartment, expecting late-night adventures and spontaneous road trips. What she got instead were mysterious phone calls at all hours, strange visitors who never stayed long, and Jake's increasingly paranoid behavior. Is she starting to realize that exciting doesn't always mean good? I wondered aloud to myself while watching the sunset from my new balcony. The first police raid happened exactly 2 months after she left me. I wasn't there to see it, of course, but Ruby, Mia's best friend, filled me in during a rather frantic phone call to my old number, which I was still monitoring remotely. Ryan, oh my, Ryan, where are you? Mia needs you. The police came to Jake's place with a warrant. They found things, Ryan. Really bad things. Drugs, weapons, I don't even know what else. Jake's been arrested, and Mia's been staying at different friends' houses because she's scared to go back to the apartment. I listened to Ruby's entire message while sipping wine that cost more than Jake's car payment. The irony wasn't lost on me. By month 3, the restraining orders started flying. Apparently, Jake had made some enemies during his exciting lifestyle, and those enemies weren't too concerned about collateral damage. Mia found herself caught in the middle of situations that made my Tuesday night book club look like extreme sports. That's when she started trying to reach me. First, it was calls to my old number. Then emails to accounts I'd already closed. Then she showed up at my old office, only to discover I'd resigned and left no forwarding information. The really desperate phase began when she convinced herself that I was just hiding somewhere nearby, waiting for her to prove she'd learned her lesson. She started camping outside my parents' house. Now, my parents are lovely people, but they're also practical. When their former daughter-in-law showed up on their doorstep at midnight, crying about how she'd made a terrible mistake and just needed to find me, they were sympathetic but firm. Mia, honey, my mother told her, Ryan's moved on with his life. You should probably do the same. But Mia wasn't ready to give up. She'd somehow convinced herself that boring, predictable Ryan was exactly what she needed to feel safe again. Funny how perspective changes when your exciting new life starts involving federal investigations, isn't it? The messages from our mutual friends became more frequent and more desperate. Ryan, I don't know where you are, but Mia is completely broken, texted Zoe, another friend from our old social circle. She keeps saying she'd give anything to have her boring life back. She screams your name in her sleep and wakes up crying. Please, just call her back. Whatever happened between you two, she's learned her lesson. I read these messages while sitting in my new office, surrounded by technology that would have impressed even Jake's criminal contacts. My boring exterior had hidden abilities that went far beyond anything Mia could have imagined. But the message that really caught my attention came from Cole, Jake's former roommate. Dude, I don't know if you've heard, but Jake's looking at serious time. Federal charges, the works. And get this, he's been telling everyone who'll listen that it's all Mia's fault somehow. Says she brought bad luck into his life. The guy's completely lost it. That's when I realized Jake might actually be dangerous in a way that had nothing to do with his criminal activities. Desperate men with nothing left to lose don't make rational decisions. So I made a choice. I picked up my phone and called Ruby. Ruby, it's Ryan. The silence on the other end lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. Ryan? Ryan? Oh my, where have you been? Mia's been. I know what Mia's been doing. I need you to listen carefully. Is she safe right now? She's at my place. Has been for the past week. Ryan, she's not doing well. She barely eats, barely sleeps, and when she does sleep, she has nightmares. About Jake, about the police raids, about losing you. She keeps saying she threw away the best thing in her life for nothing. Good. She should feel that way. The words came out colder than I intended, but I meant them. Ryan, that's not like you. Ruby, listen to me. Jake's going to blame Mia for his problems. Men like him always need someone else to blame when their world falls apart. Make sure she's never alone, and if you see any sign of Jake or his associates, call the police immediately. How do you know about? Just trust me on this one. I hung up and went back to work. But I kept monitoring the situation. 3 days later, Jake made bail. Apparently, his family had better lawyers than I'd expected. And the first thing he did was try to contact Mia. When she refused to see him, he escalated. He showed up at Ruby's apartment at 2 a.m, drunk and angry, demanding to see his woman. As if Mia was property he could reclaim whenever convenient. Ruby called the police, but Jake was gone by the time they arrived. However, he'd left enough of a mess, broken flower pots, threatening messages spray-painted on the building, that the officers took a report. That's when I decided it was time for the exciting climax Mia had been looking for. You see, during my years of being boring Ryan Cross, I'd developed quite a network of contacts. People who owed me favors, people who respected the work I'd done before I settled down, people who could make things happen very quietly and very efficiently. I made another phone call. Dean, it's Ryan. I need a favor. Dean West had been my partner in my previous life, the one I'd left behind for domestic tranquility. He'd always told me I was crazy for giving up the game for marriage, but he'd respected my choice. Ryan Cross, as I live and breathe. I was wondering when you'd surface again. Heard through the grapevine that your wife decided she needed more excitement in her life. Word travels fast. It does when the husband disappears completely and the wife starts making a spectacle of herself outside her in-laws' house. So, what can I do for you? I explained the situation with Jake, the threats, the criminal charges, the potential danger to Mia. And you want me to? Make sure he understands that bothering Mia any further would be a very poor decision. Consider it done. But Ryan, this is going to cost you. Name your price. I want you back in the game. This suburban hermit act was never you. You've got skills that are being wasted reading newspapers and mowing lawns. I looked around my penthouse, at the life I'd already started rebuilding, and smiled. Dean, I was never planning to stay retired anyway. 2 days later, Jake's harassment of Mia stopped abruptly. Not because he'd seen the error of his ways or suddenly developed respect for women, but because he'd received a visit from some very professional individuals who explained, in terms he couldn't misunderstand, that his attention was needed elsewhere. Specifically, his attention was needed on avoiding federal prison, since his legal troubles had suddenly become much more complicated. Evidence that had been previously overlooked was mysteriously finding its way to the right authorities, and witnesses who had been reluctant to testify were suddenly very cooperative. Jake found himself too busy trying to stay out of prison to worry about his ex-girlfriend. But Mia didn't know any of this. All she knew was that the harassment had stopped and Jake was no longer a threat. She also knew that I was still missing, and her guilt was eating her alive. The final twist came when she decided to hire a private investigator to find me. Now, here's where things get really interesting. Do you think she was prepared for what that investigation might uncover? The private investigator she hired was good, really good. Good enough to trace my movements for the first few weeks after I disappeared. Good enough to find some interesting inconsistencies in the story of boring Ryan Cross. What he found was that Ryan Cross, the predictable husband who read newspapers and lived a quiet suburban life, had completely erased his digital footprint with the skill of a professional. Bank accounts closed with precision, mail forwarded through a series of proxy addresses, and no paper trail leading to his current location. Mrs. Cross, the investigator told Mia during their final meeting, your husband didn't just disappear. He vanished like someone with experience making people disappear. This level of operational security isn't something you learn from YouTube tutorials. That's when Mia started to realize that maybe, just maybe, she'd never really known who she was married to. The investigator also discovered something else, significant financial transfers that suggested Ryan Cross had access to resources far beyond what his modest lifestyle had indicated. How much money are we talking about? Mia asked. Enough to disappear forever if he wants to. Enough to start a new life anywhere in the world. And enough to suggest that his previous career wasn't in accounting like you thought. Mia went pale. What do you think he did before we got married? The investigator shrugged. That's where the trail goes cold. But whatever it was, he was very good at it. That night, Mia called my parents' house again. Mrs. Cross, it's Mia. I know Ryan doesn't want to talk to me, but I need you to give him a message. My mother, bless her heart, had been handling these calls with impressive patience. What's the message, dear? Tell him I know I was wrong. Tell him I know I threw away something precious for something worthless. But also tell him I know there's more to his story than he ever shared with me. And if he ever wants to tell me who he really is, I'll listen without judgment. My mother was quiet for a moment. Mia, honey, I think you might be too late for that conversation. What do you mean? I mean my son is exactly who he always was. You just never bothered to look beneath the surface. After my mother hung up, she called the number I'd given her for emergencies. Ryan, that girl called again. She's starting to figure things out. What did you tell her? The truth. That she never really knew you. I was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the city lights from my new life. Mom, do you think I made the right choice? Disappearing like this? Son, you gave that girl 8 years of a life most women would kill for. You were faithful, loving, stable, and honest about who you were choosing to be with her. She threw it away for cheap thrills. Whatever you're doing now, wherever you are, I hope you're happy. I am, Mom. For the first time in years, I really am. But the story wasn't over yet. 6 months after I disappeared, Mia made one final, desperate attempt to reach me. She'd somehow tracked down Dean's contact information, Don't ask me how, because that took some serious detective work, and convinced him to meet with her. Dean called me afterward, laughing. Your ex-wife is something else, Ryan. She showed up at my office dressed like she was going to a funeral, hands shaking, clearly terrified but trying to be brave. What did she want? To apologize. To you, through me. She said she knows you're probably never coming back, but she needed someone to know that she understands what she lost. And she asked me to tell you that she's changed. That she's learned the difference between excitement and chaos, between adventure and stupidity. She said she wants you to know that she'd choose boring over exciting every single time now, if she could just have another chance. Dean paused. She also said something interesting. What's that? She said she finally understands why you were so calm when she left. She said someone that calm, that controlled, that capable of just disappearing without a trace. She said she realizes now that you were never actually boring. You were just choosing to be peaceful. I felt something twist in my chest, not regret exactly, but something close to it. Did you tell her anything about me? I told her what you told me to tell her if she ever came looking. Which was? That Ryan Cross is exactly where he wants to be, doing exactly what he wants to do, with exactly the people he wants to be with. And that she should focus on building a life she can be proud of instead of trying to rebuild one she destroyed. The conversation ended there, but the story didn't. Because 3 weeks after that meeting, I got a call that changed everything. Ryan, it's Ruby. I know you probably don't want to hear this, but something's happened to Mia. My blood ran cold. What kind of something? She's in the hospital. Car accident. Bad one. Everything inside me froze. How bad? Bad enough that they're not sure she's going to make it through the night. The next 12 hours were the longest of my life. I sat in my penthouse, staring at my phone, wrestling with a decision I'd never thought I'd have to make. Part of me, the part that was still hurt and angry, whispered that this wasn't my problem anymore. She'd made her choice. But the other part of me, the part that had loved her for 8 years, couldn't let her die thinking I hated her. So I did something I hadn't done in 6 months. I came home. I walked into that hospital at 3 a.m, past the sleeping security guard, past the overworked nurses, straight to room 314 where Mia lay unconscious, surrounded by machines that were keeping her alive. Ruby was there, asleep in a chair beside the bed. She woke up when I entered. Ryan? Oh my, Ryan, how did you? Shh, I whispered, not wanting to wake any of the other patients. How is she? Ruby started crying. The doctors say the next few hours are critical. Ryan, she's been asking for you. Even unconscious, she keeps saying your name. I pulled up a chair on the other side of the bed and took Mia's hand. It was smaller than I remembered, more fragile. She'd lost weight, probably from the stress of the past 6 months. Mia, I said quietly, it's Ryan. I'm here. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then locking onto mine. Ryan? Her voice was barely a whisper. Are you real, or am I dreaming? I'm real. Tears started streaming down her face. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I threw away everything good in my life for nothing. I know you probably hate me. I don't hate you, Mia. But you should. I was cruel. I was stupid. I called you boring and pathetic and, you were right, I interrupted. I was boring. But I was boring by choice, not by limitation. She looked confused, so I continued. Before I met you, I lived a very different life. A dangerous life. An exciting life. The kind of life you thought you wanted with Jake. But it was also a lonely life, and a destructive life, and when I fell in love with you, I decided that boring was better than empty. Understanding began to dawn in her eyes. The investigator said you disappeared like a professional. Because I am a professional. Or I was. I gave it up to be your husband, and I was happy to make that trade. Until you decided it wasn't enough. She closed her eyes, fresh tears leaking out. I ruined everything. You made a choice. We both made choices. Ryan, if I survive this, and I know that's a big if, is there any chance you could ever forgive me? Not take me back, I know I don't deserve that, but just forgive me? I squeezed her hand gently. Mia, I forgave you the day you left. I was hurt, but I understood. You needed to find out for yourself what excitement really costs. And now I know. Do you? She nodded weakly. Excitement without foundation is just chaos. Adventure without someone to share it with is just running away. And dangerous without love is just destructive. We talked for another hour before the painkillers pulled her back under. Ruby had fallen asleep again, so it was just me sitting in the dark hospital room, holding the hand of the woman who'd broken my heart and taught me who I really was in the process. When morning came, the doctors told us she was going to be okay. Banged up, broken bones, long recovery ahead, but she'd live. That's when I made my decision about the ending to this story. I didn't stay. When Mia woke up later that day, I was gone again. But this time, I left something behind, a letter. Mia, I'm glad you're okay. I'm glad you survived, and I'm glad you learned what you needed to learn. But I can't come back. Not because I don't forgive you, I do. Not because I don't still care about you, I always will. But because the man you fell in love with was a fiction I created because I thought it was what you needed. The real me isn't boring or exciting. I'm just someone who chooses his battles carefully and fights them with everything he has. For 8 years, I chose to battle for our marriage. When you left, I chose to battle for my own happiness. I hope you find someone who can give you the right balance of stability and adventure. Someone who can be peaceful without being boring, exciting without being dangerous. That person isn't me anymore. Take care of yourself. Ryan. P.S. The house is yours. Consider it a severance package for 8 good years. I never saw Mia again after that night in the hospital. But I heard through the grapevine that she recovered fully, went back to school, became a nurse, and eventually married a firefighter named Miles who gave her just enough excitement to keep life interesting without destroying it. As for me, I went back to my new life with a clear conscience and no regrets. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't hurting someone back. Sometimes it's succeeding so completely without them that their absence becomes irrelevant. And sometimes, just sometimes, it's letting them live with the knowledge that they had something extraordinary and threw it away for something ordinary disguised as special. I kept the boring exterior, because it's useful in my line of work. People underestimate boring men, and that's exactly where I want them. But underneath? Underneath, I'm exactly who I always was, someone who knows the difference between being peaceful and being weak, between being stable and being stuck, between being predictable and being reliable. Mia learned that difference too, eventually. She just learned it too late. So here's the final question I'll leave you with. When someone shows you who they are through their actions, not their words, do you believe them the first time? Or do you wait until they prove it beyond any doubt? Because I promise you, the answer to that question will save you a lot of heartache in the long run. Trust me on this one. I'm something of an expert on both boring and exciting, and I know which one builds a life worth living. The exciting part? That's just the seasoning. The boring part? That's the foundation everything else is built on. And you can't have a house without a foundation, no matter how pretty the decorations are on top. But this story doesn't end there. Because life has a way of coming full circle, doesn't it? 2 years after the hospital incident, I was living under a completely different identity in a city where nobody knew Ryan Cross had ever existed. I'd built a consulting firm that specialized in corporate security, helping companies protect themselves from exactly the kind of people I used to be. It was legitimate work, mostly. The kind that let me use my skills without crossing lines I didn't want to cross anymore. I had a penthouse office, a small but elite team, and clients who paid premium rates for discretion and results. I was reviewing a case file on a Thursday afternoon when my assistant buzzed in. "Sir, there's a woman here who says she needs to speak with you about a personal matter. She won't give her name, but she says you knew her husband." My blood chilled. Only a handful of people could connect my current identity to my past, and most of them were either dead or in prison. "Send her in." The woman who walked through my door wasn't Mia. She was older, maybe 60, with graying hair and worried eyes. But something about her face seemed familiar. "Mr. Vale," she said, using the name on my current business cards. "Thank you for seeing me. My name is Vera Hill." The name hit me like a punch to the gut. Hill. Jake's last name. "You're Jake's mother." She nodded, tears already forming in her eyes. "I know this might seem strange, but I need your help. And I think I might be the only person who knows the whole truth about what happened 2 years ago." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "I'm listening." Vera Hill sat down and opened a worn purse, pulling out a thick envelope. "My son is dying," she said simply. "Liver failure. Too many years of hard living, the doctors say. He's got maybe 6 months left." I kept my expression neutral. "I'm sorry to hear that, Mrs. Hill, but I'm not sure why you're telling me this." "Because before he dies, he wants to confess something. To you." She handed me the envelope. "Jake knows what you did. How you made his legal troubles worse, how you had him followed and harassed, how you made sure he couldn't bother Mia anymore. My hand froze halfway to the envelope. He also knows why you did it, she continued. And he says he deserved every bit of it. I opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter, the writing shaky but legible. Ryan Cross, or whatever you're calling yourself now. I'm dying, and I figure that gives me the right to be honest about some things. First, you should know that I never loved Mia. Not really. I loved the idea of taking something away from someone who had what I wanted. You had stability, respect, a good life. I had nothing but schemes and borrowed time. When Mia showed up at my door saying she wanted excitement, I saw an opportunity to hurt someone who represented everything I couldn't have. A decent man with a decent life. I knew she'd figure out eventually that I was bad news. I just didn't care. But here's what you don't know, I knew who you were before you married her. Remember the Santos job in Miami, 15 years ago? The warehouse that burned down with all that evidence inside? I was there that night, working for the other side. I saw you walk out of that building like it was just another Tuesday. When Mia introduced me to her husband Ryan Cross at that company picnic 5 years ago, I recognized you immediately. But you didn't recognize me, I was just some punk kid back then, barely worth noticing. I've been waiting years for the right moment to use that information. When Mia came to me wanting to leave you, I thought it was perfect. I could take your wife and destroy your nice little suburban fantasy at the same time. But you surprised me. Instead of falling apart, you just disappeared. Like smoke. Like the professional you used to be. And then my whole world started falling down around me. The federal charges, the witnesses suddenly cooperating, the evidence that kept appearing, I knew that was you. You could have had me killed, but instead you just made sure I'd spend the rest of my life in prison. Until this diagnosis. Funny how dying changes your perspective on things. I'm writing this because I want you to know, Mia never knew about your past. I never told her. Even when I was angry, even when everything was falling apart, I kept that secret. Maybe that makes me slightly less of a piece of garbage than I thought. Anyway, the reason my mother is bringing you this letter is because Mia's in trouble again. Different kind of trouble this time. She's been getting threatening messages. Photos of her at work, at home, at the grocery store. Someone's been following her, and she's scared. My mother thinks it might be connected to my old business associates. Revenge for the information I gave the feds to reduce my sentence. I know I have no right to ask you for anything. But if something happens to her because of my mistakes, that's going to weigh on what's left of my conscience. Do what you want with this information. Jake Hill. I read the letter twice before looking up at Vera Hill. How long has this been going on? 3 weeks. She filed a police report, but they say there's not much they can do unless someone actually threatens her directly. And you came to me because? Because Jake says you're the only person he knows who could stop this kind of thing. He says if anyone can keep Mia safe, it's you. I leaned back in my chair, processing this development. The smart play would be to hand the letter back and tell Mrs. Hill this wasn't my problem anymore. Mia had made her choice, faced the consequences, and moved on with her life. So had I. But here's the thing about being a professional, once you've protected someone, they're always under your protection unless you explicitly decide otherwise. And despite everything that had happened, I'd never explicitly decided to stop protecting Mia. Mrs. Hill, I'm going to need you to tell me everything you know about these threats. For the next hour, Jake's mother detailed everything Mia had told her. Photos slipped under her apartment door showing her daily routines. A black sedan that appeared wherever she went. Phone calls with no one on the other end. She's terrified, Vera said. But she's also trying to be brave about it. She won't let her friends help, won't stay with anyone else, won't even consider leaving town. She just keeps saying she's done running from her problems. That sounded like the Mia I remembered. Stubborn to a fault. I'll look into it, I told her. Thank you. Jake said you'd help if the situation was serious enough. After she left, I made some calls. Within 4 hours, I had a complete dossier on everyone Jake had rolled over during his plea negotiations. Most of them were small-time dealers who couldn't organize a birthday party, let alone a stalking campaign. But one name stood out, Adam Blue. Adam Blue had been Jake's supplier and, according to the federal transcripts, felt particularly betrayed by Jake's cooperation with law enforcement. He'd been released from prison just 6 weeks ago. More importantly, Adam Blue had a history of targeting the families of people who'd wronged him. I called Dean. Ryan, twice in 1 year? I'm starting to think you miss the old days. I need surveillance on someone. Discreet, professional, round the clock. Someone giving you trouble? Someone giving my ex-wife trouble. Dean was quiet for a moment. Ryan, are you sure about this? Getting involved with her again seems like a step backward. It's not about her, Dean. It's about finishing something I started. What do you need? Everything on Adam Blue. Current location, associates, daily routine. And I need a protection detail on Mia Cross. She's using her maiden name now, Mia Gray. But she can't know she's being watched. This is going to cost. I don't care what it costs. Within 48 hours, I had confirmation that Adam Blue was indeed responsible for the stalking campaign. He'd been building up to something bigger. The photos and following were just psychological warfare before the main event. My team intercepted communications that suggested he was planning to kidnap Mia, use her as leverage to force Jake to recant his testimony before he died. It was a stupid plan that would never work, but desperate men don't make smart decisions. I had a choice to make. I could have Dean's people grab Adam Blue and make him disappear permanently. It would be clean, efficient, and final. But I was tired of cleaning up other people's messes from the shadows. This time, I wanted Adam Blue to know exactly who was stopping him. I put on my best suit, the kind that costs more than most people's cars, and paid Adam Blue a personal visit at the rundown motel where he was staying. He answered the door expecting room service and found me instead. Adam Blue? Who's asking? Someone who's very interested in your recent photography hobby. The recognition dawned slowly in his eyes. He'd obviously seen photos of me during his research on Jake's associates, but the man standing in his doorway didn't look much like the suburban husband from Mia's social media. You're Ryan Cross. I am. Jake's ex-wife's ex-husband. Among other things. Adam tried to close the door, but I'd already stepped inside. Not aggressively, just firmly enough to make my point. We need to talk, Adam. I don't have nothing to say to you. That's fine. I'll do the talking. I walked to the window and closed the blinds, then sat down in the room's single chair like I own the place. Here's what's going to happen, Adam. You're going to stop taking pictures of Mia Gray. You're going to stop following her. You're going to check out of this motel and leave town tonight. Or what? I smiled. Or I'll show you the difference between someone who plays dangerous and someone who is dangerous. Adam puffed up his chest, trying to look tough. You don't scare me, old man. I know all about you. Suburban dad who couldn't keep his wife happy. Is that what you think? I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo. Do you recognize this warehouse, Adam? His face went pale. It was a picture of the building where his former partner Kai Fox had been found dead 3 years ago, a case that had never been solved. How do you, Adam, the life you think I lived with Mia was my retirement. This is my actual resume. I swiped to the next photo. Then the next. Each one showed a crime scene or missing person case that Adam would recognize from his years in the underworld. Now, I'm going to give you a choice. You can leave Mia alone and disappear quietly, or you can find out why people in your line of work used to cross the street when they saw me coming. Adam was shaking now. You can't prove any of that. I don't need to prove anything, Adam. I just need you to understand that bothering Mia Gray is a very bad idea. I stood up and walked to the door. You've got 2 hours to check out. If I see any evidence that you've been within 100 miles of her after tonight, we'll have a very different conversation. I left him sitting there in that motel room, staring at photos that told a story he definitely didn't want to be part of. Adam Blue checked out an hour later and was on a bus to Mexico before midnight. But solving the Adam Blue problem created a new problem. Mia knew something had changed. The next day, Ruby called the emergency number I'd given her years ago. Ryan, I don't know what you did, but Mia says the guy who was following her is gone. Just gone. Like he never existed. That's good news. She also says she knows you were involved somehow. I was quiet for a moment. What makes her think that? Because she's not stupid, Ryan. Strange man starts stalking her, then suddenly stops for no apparent reason? She knows that doesn't happen by accident. Ruby, she wants to see you. That's not going to happen. Ryan, listen to me. She's different now. Really different. She volunteers at a women's shelter, helps other people who've made bad choices get back on their feet. She's been going to therapy, working on understanding why she sabotaged her own happiness. Good for her. She's not the same person who left you. Neither am I. Ruby sighed. Just think about it, okay? She's not asking for you to take her back. She just wants to thank you properly. And maybe to understand who you really are. After I hung up, I realized I had a decision to make. For 2 years, I'd been living as someone else, building a new life, telling myself I'd moved on completely. But the truth was, I'd never really processed what had happened with Mia. I'd just buried it under work and distance and a new identity. Maybe it was time to finish that chapter properly. I called Dean. I need you to arrange a meeting. With who? My ex-wife. Ryan, are you absolutely sure about this? Opening that door again. I'm not opening anything, Dean. I'm closing it. Properly this time. The meeting was set for the following Saturday at a neutral location, a coffee shop in the city where Mia now lived, far enough from our old hometown that we wouldn't run into anyone we knew. I arrived first, choosing a table in the back corner where I could see all the exits. Old habits. Mia walked in exactly on time, and I almost didn't recognize her. She'd cut her hair short and dyed it darker. She was thinner than before, but it looked healthy rather than stressed. She carried herself differently too, more carefully, like someone who'd learned that actions have consequences. She spotted me immediately and walked over, but didn't sit down right away. Ryan? You look. She searched for words. Different. So do you. She sat down across from me, and for a moment we just looked at each other. Thank you, she said finally. For whatever you did about the stalking situation. I know it was you. I don't know what you're talking about. She almost smiled. Right. Well, thank you anyway. We ordered coffee, and then sat in awkward silence until it arrived. Ruby says you wanted to see me, I said finally. I wanted to apologize. Properly this time. Not while I'm half dead in a hospital bed. You already apologized. No, I asked for forgiveness. There's a difference. She was right about that. Ryan, I spent 2 years in therapy trying to understand why I destroyed the best thing in my life. Want to know what I figured out? I waited. I was scared. Scared of being happy, scared of being settled, scared of admitting that what we had was actually perfect for me. So I convinced myself it was boring instead of recognizing it was peaceful. She traced the rim of her coffee cup with one finger. I told myself you were predictable when you were actually reliable. I told myself you were pathetic when you were actually strong enough to choose contentment over chaos. Mia, let me finish. Please. I nodded. I also figured out that I never really knew you. Not the real you. I knew the version of yourself you chose to be with me, but I never looked deeper. Never asked about your life before we met, never wondered why someone with your capabilities chose such a quiet existence. She looked directly into my eyes. I know now that you weren't boring, Ryan. You were just being boring for me. Because you thought that's what I needed. It was what you needed. At the time. Was it? Or was it what I said I wanted because I was too immature to appreciate what I actually had? That was a good question. One I'd been asking myself for 2 years. Does it matter now? I asked. It matters to me. Because I want you to know that I understand the sacrifice you made. Giving up who you really were to be who you thought I needed. She reached across the table and touched my hand briefly. And I want you to know that I would never ask you to make that sacrifice again. We talked for another hour. She told me about her work at the women's shelter, about the therapy, about the nightmares that had finally stopped a few months ago. She told me about Miles, the firefighter she'd married, and how she'd been completely honest with him about her past from the beginning. He knows about you, she said. About how I treated you, about why you left. He says anyone who could forgive me for what I did and still protect me 2 years later must be a hell of a man. Smart guy. He is. He's also nothing like you, which is probably for the best. I don't think I could handle loving someone like you again. What do you mean? I mean someone who's capable of both infinite gentleness and absolute ruthlessness. Someone who could spend 8 years reading me bedtime stories and then make a dangerous criminal disappear with a phone call. She was right. That combination had proven too much for her to handle. I should get going, I said, checking my watch. I have a flight to catch. Where are you headed? Classified. She laughed, actually laughed. Of course it is. As I stood to leave, she grabbed my hand. Ryan, wait. One more thing. What's that? Are you happy? Really happy? I thought about my new life. The work that challenged me, the team that respected me, the woman I'd been seeing who knew exactly who I was and loved me anyway. Yes, I said. I really am. Good. That's all I wanted to know. I walked away from that coffee shop knowing I'd never see Mia again. And for the first time since she'd left me, that thought didn't hurt. Because I finally understood something important. The best revenge isn't making someone pay for hurting you. The best revenge is building a life so good that their opinion of your old life becomes completely irrelevant. Mia had learned to appreciate what she'd lost, but I'd learned something better. I'd learned to build something new that was even better than what I'd lost. And that, my friends, is how a boring man gets the last laugh. The final twist? 6 months after our coffee meeting, I got an invitation in the mail. Mia and Miles were renewing their wedding vows, and she wanted me to know she was truly happy. I didn't attend, obviously. But I did send a gift, a photo of myself and Ava, my new partner in both business and life, at our own wedding ceremony. On the back, I wrote, "Found my perfect balance of boring and exciting. Hope you found yours too." Because sometimes the greatest victory isn't proving someone wrong about you. Sometimes it's proving to yourself that you were always worth more than they realized. And sometimes, it's knowing that they finally understand that too, even if it's too late to matter.